What's up, my wizards? It's Dev, SBMTG, we like it a magic, and I'm back on the couch for one today. Seems like it's been forever since we were chilling on the couch together, like a family, but gotta talk about something, because there's no doubt, seriously, none at all whatsoever, that this is maybe the most hyped core set of all time. It's up there. A lot of people talking about like how busted all of these cards are. But that said, I still think there's plenty of cards to talk about that aren't being talked about or taken seriously, or maybe they have to wait on a rotation. Maybe they have interactions that either haven't been seen or tested yet. There's a lot of stuff to talk about in this set that, again, isn't being talked about. So today, top 10 core set 2020 sleepers. Let's get it. Well, let's get everything kicked off here with an honorable mention, but it really just gives me an excuse to have 11 slots on the list because I have a lot to say about this card. We got to see a sort of callback to the living equipments in this set, and some of these have actually been getting some press. The blue one can save creatures from removal so long as it's your turn and allow you to repeat into the battlefield triggers. That's kind of cool. The black one costs a lot of mana, but it's a sack outlet that puts a bunch of big creatures on the battlefield, and like people have been talking about that one too. But one that I've seen almost no talk about is Mask of Immolation. Now, the deck I've been playing the most on Arena for the last few months now is, without a doubt, Red-Black Judith. The deck is fast, it's fun, gets quick wins, and I really like the list. So a card like this makes me wonder if it could maybe deserve a one-of slot in a deck like that. You got so many things that work with it. First of all, 2 mana for a body on the battlefield is sometimes okay, but this allows any creature, plus the token that it creates when it comes out, to go mask off and actually deal damage to anything, whether it's a planeswalker or a creature, or just straight up to the opponent's face, which is more often than not what you're going to want to do to it. This is a Ziggy Tail. This adds damage to things like Footlight Fiend and lets them sack as well. You know, and that actually is really important for either taking out small creatures and clearing a path for things to attack, or more often than not, again, what the Rakdos Judith deck wants to do is just pile on damage to the opponent as quickly as possible. And if you can attach this to a Footlight Fiend, sacrifice it for free after you pay the 2 to attach it, then that's 2 damage to an opponent. If you have a Judith out, suddenly that's a bolt. Same thing with Dreadhorde Butcher. Sack that for all the damage in the world, plus an extra 1 from Mask of Immolation. If you have a Judith out, get an extra damage from that. Even if you play Mayhem Devil in your deck, deal an extra damage. So there's a lot of ways to just pile on lots and lots of damage. Hey, Bubba. There's a lot of ways to pile on lots and lots of extra damage with the Mask of Immolation out. And maybe my favorite thing about it is that even if it doesn't, work well with anything you have going on the board right this second, then it turns all of your creature draws in the late game into damage. That's actually really nice if you're just trying to deal that last couple of damage to an opponent. Again, it turns your Fiends into shocks. It turns your Dreadhorde Butchers into shocks. It turns any creature that you draw into 1 damage, and sometimes even that's all you need to finish off a game. Also, if you can't get your creatures through for combat damage, sometimes if you have enough mana, you can attach this to 2-3 creatures over the course of a turn and just deal a ton of damage in lieu of, say, casting a Heartfire if you don't have that in your hand. So there are lots of ways to flex this card in the red-black aggro deck, and I like a lot about it. Now that I've talked about the honorable mention for 20 minutes, how long was that? Let's go ahead and get into the actual list here. With number 10, Woodland Champion. I see a lot in this little thing. Now, on turn 2, you play it and it might just get eaten by a shock. That's the floor of the card, and it feels really bad. But anything besides the floor feels pretty good. It's value if you're able to play this on turn 2. Then turn 3, lead up with, Raise the Alarm. We just got that in core set. Maybe play Sapling Migration. Either one of these will make your thing at 4/4 on turn 3 to go ahead and swing with. That seems good to me, at the very least. And, of course, later in the game, you can kick that Sap Migration and make this thing enormous all in one shot. So that's kind of cool. Or you can play turn 2 Amara, turn 3 Woodland Champion, swing with the Amara, immediately make a champion at 3/3. Lots of cool stuff. Maybe you go turn 2 Champion into turn 3 History of Benalia. I really like this play, actually, because you'll go ahead and get a 3/3 champion. On the next turn, you'll get a 4/4 champion, not to mention any other tokens you might be creating. You got things like Legion's Landing in this format. Once you flip it over into Adanta, you get a +1/+1 counter every single turn, if that's what you're doing. So that's so many awesome things you can do with this. Plus, Hanged Executioner is a good way to, curve this. Turn 2 champion, turn 3 Executioner. Get yourself a 3/3 champion, plus a couple of flyers. One of them can sack to kill a thing. There's just so much you could could possibly do with a Woodland Champion. Oh, and by the way, I haven't even mentioned, like, Finale of Glory. That card exists, as well as March of the Multitudes. I mean, there's both can make this card huge all in one shot. And Tristani also is a card that exists in Standard. There's just so much you can do with this thing. I think it might be a better card than Shaman for these green-white tokens decks, too, because it's not legendary, it's easier to cast. And this card has a lot of potential. I don't really see it being the heavyweight champion or anything, but it could get an IC belt. But on to number 9, and I hope editing dev is ready, because I've got quite the task with him. When I talk about Retributive Wand, or Retributive Wand, I think you're supposed to say Retributive, but it sounds weird. But anyway, this card is actually really, really awesome for a lot of different reasons. I really want to be the first to break the Retributive Wand deck, where you just try to kill them with nothing but Retributive Wand damage. You can get back Retributive Wands from your graveyard if that's what it takes. You can go tutor them up if that's what it takes. There's just a lot of ways to play this card, even in Standard, it turns out. Now, if you're looking for ways to sack your Retributive Wand and put it into the graveyard, you got a lot of options. There's Vraska, the Queen. She's always good for something like this. But there's even Bantu, which can draw you cards and deal a bunch of damage off of Wand's trigger. Plus Costly Plunder, if you want to resort to that, although I think it might actually be really good to sacrifice this to Costly Plunder. There's also Makeshift Munitions, still in the format for a little while too. Sage of Latinum, if you want to go that deep. Destructive Digger, just got that card. It could do that thing. Goblin Barrage, look how much damage you could do all at one time off of a Goblin Barrage. And a Wand being out. Plus, there's more. Tezzeret can get it back from your graveyard and do more things. Tamiyo can get it back from your graveyard to do more things. Trusty Pack Beast is in the format. Daring Archaeologist still in the format for a little while. Cavalier of Dawn just hit the format. This can actually kill your Retributive Wand, deal 5 damage, put a 3/3 out, and then when Cavalier dies, you get your Retributive Wand back. That's crazy. Just look at all the combo potential Retributive Wand has. I just want to play this deck and nothing else. But if you go on the internet right now and try to search for like things you can do with this card, there's just really not many people talking about this whatsoever, and I think that might be a mistake overlooking this thing right now. If anything, you just combine it with like a Shrapnel Blast and deal 10 to the dome immediately in older formats and Commander and stuff. So there's just so many cool things about Wand, and I wish more people were paying attention to it. It's an awesome card. I'm going to go ahead and give you a warning before we start number 8 here. The next few cards on the list we're going green for, because I think there are a lot of green cards that are being overlooked, but I don't think that too many of them are like super spectacular, and they all kind of occupy like middle of the list space. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with number 8, Loaming Shaman. I think there's a lot more to this card than people are giving it credit for. Now, first of all, this just isn't a weak ability. It's not a bad line of text at all. This is actually kind of desirable depending on what kind of deck you're putting it in, and that's where we got to do some talking. This could go in blue-green decks with Tamiyo, because Tamiyo mills yourself, puts cards in the graveyard, and you might want those back occasionally. Loaming Shaman's good with that. It's also decent against decks that might either be trying to mill you out, which isn't necessarily super true with Ashiok in the format. Your graveyard's not much of a consideration if you're being milled by Ashiok. But there are other decks that just stall the game out, especially decks that play like Big Teferi and whatnot. There might not even be a win condition in their Esper deck, and that's where Loaming Shaman can come in and make sure that you don't get decked. That's actually kind of cool. A Clear the Mind on a body ain't so bad, looking, at least, against those decks. I kind of like that application. Especially when you don't have that many cards in your library to begin with. If you're down to 4 or 5, well then Loaming Shaman basically just sort of lets you regrow a bunch of cards all at one time. It's not the same as putting them in your hand, but it's a lot better than if your deck had 30, 40 cards left in it, for instance. So I think there are a lot of cool applications to Loaming Shaman, and we'll see if it sneaks its way into a deck or two. But number 7 is another 3-mana green card that get stuff back from your graveyard. I think it does it a lot better, and we've seen this card before, and saw some play last time we had it. It's Pulse of Murasa. I've always liked this card, and I continue to like it to this day. Now, first of all, don't underestimate the land clause on this. This can get back, say, a Blast Zone. That could be a big game for you. Or it can get back a Field of the Dead if you're playing that deck and they somehow killed your Field of the Dead. Or maybe you discarded it or milled it away and you're trying to find it that way. Pulse of Murasa can get it back too. That's pretty cool. Lots of things you can do with this. And while we're on the land clause, by the way, works kind of well with Nissa. If you use your Pulse of Murasa to get back a land, play it, it can kind of pay for itself. Get back a forest, play it, tap it for 2 mana, untap it with Nissa and make it a creature, and suddenly you can create 4 mana with that forest that you got back. So again, Pulse paid for itself and gained you 6 life at instant speed which is really, really sweet. Plus, the ability to get back lands from your graveyard is pretty nice in the Nissa deck, where as soon as you turn your lands into a creature, they have a huge target on their back. But this can also be a nice little anti-aggro piece for combo or mid-range decks like those Nissa decks, and I like that. Get back something from your graveyard that either works with your combo and you've lost at some point in the game, or maybe, again, milled it away, and get a nice little life total cushion, which is really sweet. Even with Tamiyo this works. It seems like this could, like, for instance, Tamiyo's negative ability is just better than this card, but imagine casting a Pulse of Murasa at the end of your opponent's turn, getting something back, getting that 6 life, and then using Tamiyo's minus to get back Pulse of Murasa, gain another 6 life, and still get something back from your graveyard. So you didn't necessarily waste Tamiyo's -3. There's a lot of ways this card plays super nice in this format, with a bunch of cool like Simic strategies. So I think the card could again worm its way into some decks as a 1 or 2 of, the same way it did last time, because combo mid-range decks, which Nissa kind of is, really love a card like this. But speaking of Nissa, another 3-mana green card. I told you there are going to be a few of these. Overgrowth Elemental. I don't know why nobody's talking about this thing. It actually looks like it's awesome. I mean, it does 3 things. It does 3 separate things, which is good enough on its own. But let's talk about those 3 things. First of all, the Elementals deck. I mean, that's probably going to at least try to be a thing in the upcoming format, and this looks like a very sweet 3-drop for it. So, of course, keep that in mind. You know, turn 3 Overgrowth and turn 4 Omnath could actually be a pretty sweet little play sequence, so I like that. But, again, in these Nissa decks, you can go ahead, play your Overgrowth Elemental, and if you've already played your Nissa deck game, that means you put a +1/+1 counter on one of your lands. When your lands die, if they're creatures at least, you get to gain a life. That's actually kind of nice to run your creatures into combat, and if they do die, you gain some life. If they die to a lightning strike, you gain some life, and it grows your Overgrowth Elemental at the same time. That really de-incentivizes and takes the target off of your lands when you create creature lands with your Nissa. So I like so much about this card, not only in the tribal elemental decks it's sure to just get slammed into, but also for sneaky Nissa purposes. I think this might actually be a really decent card in that deck, and could sort of overtake a card like Wildgrowth Walker when that card rotates out, especially. I think this isn't necessarily the same thing by a long shot, but it fulfills a similar function, gains you a little bit of life, and gets bigger as you play more cards and the game goes on. It's, again, not the same card. 3 life is not 1 life, and 1 life is not 3 life, but fulfills a similar function, sort of a fixed Wildgrowth Walker that rewards you for playing the game as the game goes on. So again, really like a lot of this, what this card does, and this card does a lot. But alright, we are mid-list and out of the green tunnel. Here we are with number 5, Golems Tireless Pilgrim. Most of the talk I've seen about this has been Commander talk, which I have no problem with, but I'm surprised I haven't seen more Standard talk about it. But first of all, the card's just hard to kill. It can't be killed by cast down for the next few months. Lava Coil, ever, that's kind of nice. And a bunch of red removal. Has a real problem hitting this card, so I just think it's kind of hard to kill. And that's definitely a point in its favor, but I think it goes in some specific decks right now. First of all, this can go and get a Blast Zone. Well, again, I'll talk about that card again for just a second, and if that's what you're trying to do, that's awesome. It can also go search up your Field of the Dead, that deck again, if you want to build that deck, and a Field of the Dead deck is probably going to play a bunch of different lands, so you'll be more likely to actually activate this thing's activated ability, and this activated ability just wins the game most of the time. It's just crazy to play cards for free off the top of your deck, so that's good. But the deck that I most want to play this in, and I think the deck that it's tailor-made for in Standard, is Chromatic Black. Now, first of all, Chromatic Black plays Chromatic Lantern, obviously, so you're just able to use this ability. That's pretty sweet right there, so keep that in mind. But also, another plus for the deck is that it plays Cabal Stronghold, and it's a premier land in the deck. It's what you want to get in pretty much every game to set up these crazy plays. So this goes and gets your Cabal Stronghold just right at the point of the game where Cabal Stronghold begins to matter. And another thing that people aren't talking about, the entire time this is in the format, you're going to have to look twice at any land that gets printed, especially lands that have ETB triggers or dies triggers, sacrifice abilities and stuff like that. This is going to go super well with, so if we see an insane land that we actually want to search up and put into play, this is going to get that much better. And it's got a year. It's got like 3 or 4 sets worth of content to come out for that to occur, so really keep your eye on this card the whole time it's around. Number 4 is Chandra's Regulator. It's not like people aren't talking about this card, but they're not taking it seriously. And there are a few cards on this list like that. Chandra's Regulator, I think, being the first. Because again, this card's gotten some press, but for the most part, people are like, nah, it's a casual thing, commander card, whatever, play it on the kitchen table. Nah, I don't think so. I think there's so much you can do with this. Just in the first ability. Just 1 mana to copy a Chandra ability is insane. 4 mana Chandra, oh, just draw a bunch of cards all in one turn. That seems pretty nice. Or 6 mana Chandra. Oh, just get you multiple emblems in the same turn. Oh, 3 mana Chandra? Oh, just play multiple spells out of your graveyard. Who cares? It's all gravy. I don't care. That's just, all of that is absolutely nuts. It's completely bat poop. God, I wish I could curse on YouTube because I'm that excited about this card. It's just a crazy thing. I'm surprised more people aren't talking about it, if only for the first ability, but it's a cheap card to play that also enables draw fixing in any mono red deck because pretty much every card is going to fit the bill. You can either discard a mountain or a red card. In a mono red deck, look at that. It just says discard a card. And fixing draws in red decks is actually really good. Not to mention the fact that you can discard things as an upside. Maybe discard an Arc-like Phoenix and start getting evil with that. That's sweet. Maybe a card with Jumpstart. Doesn't matter. Something you want to reanimate a little bit later, you know, maybe Drakaseth or something like that. Drop that into your graveyard a few turns later. Bond of Revival. Yeah, the 5-mana black one. Whoops, it has haste. Look at that. Like, there's so much you can do just by fixing your draws or putting specific cards in your graveyard. And all of it for a relatively low investment. I think this is a really good card. Let's get to the top 3, boys and ghouls. And the reason I use that hackneyed phrase is because we're talking about a spirit here. Number 3 is Hanged Executioner. Brought up this card a little bit earlier, but I think it's powerful enough to actually get a really high spot on this list. I've got my eye on this thing. I've already said it's good in any tokens build you might want to put together, and that point stands, but it's also good in decks like Aristocrats that want a big board to sacrifice creatures, you know, things like Cruel Celebrant. Go really nice with a card that gives you 2 flyers on the board at the same time. And note how well this could also go with Sorin. You do have to exile it to use its ability, but just the fact that you can play this, get 2 creatures, sacrifice it, bring it back, get 2 more creatures, that seems really nice to do over and over again until you have to exile it to take care of something else on the other side of the table. It could also go well in any potential blue-white Flyers decks that are shaping up, and that deck looks really real right now. You've got not only Sephara, but Winged Words, and those are really high power level cards for a blue-white Flyers deck. And although this does compete with things like, say, Resplendent Angel in that deck, and even Cloudkin Seer for that matter, I still think it's a 3-drop worthy of consideration because it increases your board state, gives you 2 evasive either attackers or blockers, and gives you a way to exile things off the battlefield entirely, like Rekindling Phoenix, for instance. This is a really good answer to that exiles Phoenix and again still leaves you up on board presence. That is a really nice card, and I'm surprised more people aren't talking about this thing. Now, number 2 is a card that a lot of people have talked about, I'll give it that, but mostly people talk about it just so they can write it off, and that's Drawn from Dreams. And I think this card is actually absolutely ridiculously fantastically crazy, and although it's a lot of superlatives. Although I don't think it's going to rule the format or anything, I do think that it's miles better than anyone's giving it credit for right now, especially in a format with 3 fairy that allows you to cast this at instant speed, at which point it's just a crazy card. I mean, usually the critique of this card is that it's sorcery speed, so it's bad. Not if you have a Teferi out, this card is just stupid. But even decks that don't play 3 fairy might like this. The Nexus combo deck might actually think this is cool. This helps you find your Nexus or any other pieces that you might want. A 7-card dig is so much. And in Nissa decks, this might be pretty good do if you're trying to find your Mass Manipulation, your Hydroid Krasis, whatever, any specific card you're trying to find. You've got all the mana in the world, so who cares if you're spending 4 mana on your turn? Plus, control decks, again, even if you don't have your 3 fairy out when you play this, you might go ahead and skip your turn 4 if you're not going to die on turn 5 when your opponent untaps, so that you can guarantee you find your Kaya's Wrath or an Absorb or whatever answer you're looking for. So, I really like this card. Fixed Dig Through Time is still very, very powerful, and don't forget it. But my number 1 is another card that people have talked about, but just aren't taking seriously. This is another thing that people bring up a lot, just in service of putting it down as soon as they bring it up. And that is Night Pack Ambusher. I think that this card is absolutely nuts. The way I look at this is kind of like a Biogenic Ooze with Flash, that you can play as removal, but Obviously, this is going to play a little bit differently than Biogenic Ooze, and it's going to go in different decks as well. But, that said, it could also go in those same, Simic decks that usually use Biogenic Ooze as a sideboard option. I still think they might want to play this, but mostly, this makes blue-green or even mono-green, but Bant, whatever, draw-go decks a reality. Maybe Sultai, draw, go. I really, really like a card like this, where the entire deck plays at instant speed and you almost never do anything on your turn. So just one turn with a wolf out is going to get you like 7 power. Any more turns than that, and this is just a straight up win condition for decks that almost never want to play spells on their own turn. Not only that, but you can play this as removal when your opponent tries to get in on you. On turn 4, boom, Ambusher, take out your 3/3 or whatever. That seems like a good play. To me at least. That, and I really like the play pattern represented by Frilled Mystic alongside this card. I know they're both 4s, but again, that represents a pretty cool little thing you can do on turn 4, where you play your 4th land, you say go, and if your opponent tries to do something, you Frilled Mystic it. If they don't do anything of importance, at least, then you just wait until the end of their turn, you play your Night Pack Ambusher. Again, or if they're trying to get in on you, you play your Night Pack Ambusher, whatever. I just like the way the two cards kind of play together so long as you have 4 mana let up. So there's so much that's cool about this card, and I really don't understand what people aren't seeing, because there's plenty of people going through the trouble of analyzing the card. They're just coming to a weird conclusion in my mind. A 4 mana 4/4 is a decent rate in and of itself. Throw flash on it, it becomes that much better, but the ability to make a 3/3 every turn, that's just, come on y'all, what are you not seeing? The card is crazy. Now that is my sleepers list for Core Set 2020. If your favorite card didn't make it, don't worry, maybe I don't think it's a sleeper. Maybe I think it's just a good card that people know is a good card. So just wait a couple of days, and it might end up on the top 20 or top 25 list I'm putting out in a couple of days. So just wait it out, and maybe you'll see your favorite thing. Just let me know how you felt about the list down there in the comments section. Anything I should have put on it, whatever. Any interactions that I missed with cards that did make the list. Or if you think a card is terrible that I think might be pretty good. This is always inviting a lot of people to be like, that card's bad, but I'm picking cards that people specifically already kind of think are bad. So, of course the card looks bad. That's the whole point of the list. But anyway, I think I'm done for this one. So just check out the first link in the description. Go to TCG Player if you want to pre-order any of this stuff. Or if you just want sealed product, they got smashing prices on that too. So hit that down there. Check out the Patreon if you want to donate to the channel. But most importantly, like and subscribe if you haven't done it yet, because there's a ton of crazy content coming up. Not only do we have that list I was talking about, but we got to start building some decks here soon. We're going to have a lot of gameplay too. I'm going to be opening up my Core Set 2020 pre-release for Arena on camera too, so all that content, you probably want it. Join the Strictly Squad? Is that what we settled on? I don't know, a lot of you had really good suggestions in the comment section of the video where I asked you to come up with a thing, so I appreciate your hard work on that. But I think that I'm going to get out of here for now, get to work editing this, because I kind of named a buttload of cards and it's going to take a while. So let's get in there. Ziggy, you came back for the end. Don't knock over the mic. You didn't. You're such a good bub. Anyway, I'm Dev from The Place, and this is Ziggy. We'll catch you cats later. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.